Hello, and welcome to our presentation on the XXYY project. The AXYS conference organizers asked us to prepare a session about how we did it, in the hopes of assisting some of the other X and Y aneuploidy groups discover ways to further develop and grow their communities. We will begin with a brief history of how the XXYY project came to be. In 1998, a passionate and driven woman named Renee started the XXYY Parent Network. Prior to 1998, Renee was seeking support for her XXYY son. She found the KS&A Klinefelter Syndrome Association. However, there were no specific supports and very little information for families with XXYY syndrome. She took it upon herself to start an XXYY website and online support, with the added intent of finding more XXYY families. Renee found 3 other families, and together they were the original parent network. Renee began developing and distributing questionnaires. She collected and compiled data to capture the similarities of the XXYY guys they came to know. After 5 years of dedication to this work, in 2003, the XXYY Parent Network became the XXYY Project, affiliated with the Colorado Nonprofit Developmental Center. 2003 was also important for another reason. The XXYY Project organized their very first in-person gathering of 15 families. This first symposium was significant because it cemented the strong bonds of the founding members of the XXYY guys and their families. 2004 also produced an integral event. Renee met Dr. Nicole Tartaglia, who subsequently attended the second XXYY symposium. Dr. T's compassion and interest in SCAs and XXYY in particular became a fundamental component of the XXYY project's success. Dr. Tartaglia's dedication, along with support from our XXYY families through fundraising, donations, and research, have produced numerous valuable documents, papers, and reports that are cornerstones for progression in understanding XXYY today. This brings us to an opportunity we all treasure. Here is the one and only Dr. Nicole Tartaglia as she looks back on the origins of the XXYY project.
So hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Nicole Tartaglia, or Dr. T for short, as the X and Y chromosome community knows me. And I want to share a little bit about how I became involved in research in XXYY syndrome and how that then stimulated all the subsequent work and progress that we've made with the XXYY project. So how did we do it? So talking about stimulating research in XXYY. So it all started with Kyle. Kyle was the son of Renee Beauregard. Kyle has XXYY syndrome and was having a lot of behavioral and learning challenges as a young boy. So he was actually seen by and diagnosed by a woman named Dr. Rhonda Hagerman, who has been a longtime mentor and supporter of me, but I met her when I was a medical student and was very interested in genetic causes of disability. She's a developmental behavioral pediatrician like myself, and she specialized in really a different genetic disorder called Fragile X syndrome. But in all of her work and evaluation of kids looking for Fragile X syndrome, she found many other genetic disorders that she was also interested in, and also identified Kyle's diagnosis of XXYY. So Renee and Dr. Hagerman had this very close working relationship in terms of, Kyle's direct care. Now, the other piece is that Renee was a go-getter and knew that Dr. Hagerman was also a very active researcher. So Renee was very persistent, and we have to do research on XXYY. Can you do research on XXYY? We'll help you do research on XXYY. I have a whole community of patients with XXYY. And so had been really pushing Dr. Hagerman. So when I was going to start a developmental pediatrics fellowship, anytime doctors are involved in academics and training programs, they have, fellows and trainees under them who are required to do scholarly projects or research projects. So when I was starting my fellowship project with Dr. Hagerman, I said, well, I know I'll learn a lot about Fragile X working with you. I would like to do my own individual scholarly project and research on a different condition, if that's possible, so that I have broader training and experience. And so, that recollection of Renee's frequent requests for research in XXYY syndrome really led to Dr. Hagerman saying, hey, I have a great idea. Let me connect you with Dr. Beauregard. Or, well, she was kind of Dr. Beauregard at that time, with Renee. And maybe we can come up with a plan to have your project be on XXYY syndrome. And I learned a little bit about XXYY, was very interested in that, and said, okay, let's try it. So we wrote a grant together, really. Renee and Dr. Hagerman wrote a grant. I contributed a little, but at that time didn't really know how to write grants. But they did, and they got a really small grant for $15,000 to $20,000, which, in the scope of general research is not that much money, but really funded the project. And that was the starting place for our project. Was that $15,000 or $20,000? And I'll tell you a little bit about what we did with it. And so it paid for the first project, but I also want to tell you, the project itself also inspired, the subsequent development of the Extraordinary Kids Clinic from my interactions with talking with XXYY families and hearing their stories. And then obviously from that, all the subsequent research and collaborations with the XXYY project and with AXYS and all of the rest of the X and Y conditions as well. And so, I think one really important piece to think about is that a little bit of investment in people who are training and learning can really lead to a lot of productivity and exciting work. So generally, what did that money pay for? It paid for me to go around really to all the XXYY families in different groups and interview them about, the experiences from when the kids or when the guys were kids, really young babies, what their health was like, what their development was like, how school was going, what their mental health was like, all their medications. We did some little IQ testing and motor skills testing, but really it paid for me to be there and learn from the families. And so I learned from the families myself. This was me at my first XXYY symposium in 2004. And basically I was in a little bunk room on a bunk bed. I remember writing down all this stuff and hearing the lived experience and the stories from families. And so I spent time there. This one was in Colorado, and my first time, but then also the funding just paid for travel for me. I ended up staying at parents' houses. Like I was, crashing in the guest room, eating Cheerios or other cereal in the morning with the kids. But it also brought me to meetings in Sacramento, in Atlanta, in Buffalo, in Boston. And these were the XXYY symposiums where we would meet with old families, catch up, but also meet with new families and include more and more people in our research. I star Sacramento because in Sacramento, it was when there was the inspiration from families of another medical provider who's now very involved with the XXYY project and with AXYS, Dr. Shanley Davis. She was an undergrad student at the time. And when the families went to look at the dorms where everyone would stay for the conference at UC Davis, Dr. Davis was the tour director and working for the dorms in the summer as an undergrad there, and became very involved, and then ended up working and reaching out as a research assistant at UC Davis under myself and Dr. Hagerman. So, it was families again that inspired her and led to all of her great work. I went to Canada and Toronto. I went to Australia and New Zealand. You can see there, not very well, but there was a little kangaroo on the diaper of the Australia boys, which I thought was cute. I went to the UK and Denmark where they organized conferences. There were twins with XXYY down there, and even Japan, where I met a young man with XXYY and was able to do some other travel and Mount Fuji hiking as well. So all of this led to a big database of a lot of information about XXYY syndrome, and a paper called A New Look at XXYY Syndrome, which really described and was the largest paper and still is the largest paper to date describing medical and developmental features of XXYY. And here are all the authors on that paper, of which you can see Renee, Dr. Ross worked with us, and Dr. Davis, and then my awesome mentors, Robin and Rondi, as well. But, you know, the other important thing that Renee did was she made sure that even though we were primarily studying XXYY syndrome, we were also studying all the other X and Y variations, because she really felt like, you know, this is not just XXYY. Obviously, we want to focus on that, but all of the families of trisomy X, of XYY, of XXY are all dealing with a lot of challenges related to development, education, you know, health, and really need a lot more research across the board. So whenever I was at different meetings or seeing patients in the clinics, I did the project, also saw patients both in Colorado and at UC Davis. We would bring in all the other variations, and I got to meet adults who had XXY and told me their stories, which were really influential. And it was really hearing the patients' experiences that led to, you know, stimulating my interest and dedication to this field, which has then, you know, led to subsequent funding and obviously involvement with AXYS and with the XXYY project. So that's the story. Thank you to everyone, and especially those inspirational people, Kyle, Renee, and Dr. Hagerman.
Thank you, Dr. Tartaglia. Your continued commitment to our SCA communities is greatly appreciated. By 2007, the XXYY project was developing into an effective organization. A board of directors had been formed, which allowed the founding members to focus on specific areas of need that were necessary for the project to thrive. The fundamental roles that were important to develop included director, communications, family support, and medical liaison advisors. In our experience, these positions, with a strong team of parent advisors, allowed the XXYY project to produce a meaningful mission. The project started to create hard copy newsletters that were jam-packed with valuable information. All of the information that was gathered by the parent advisor team needed a place to live, and so the project also developed its own library. As these amazing efforts were ongoing, it must never be understated how important it was to have a support line for families to reach out and receive caring, educated information about their diagnosis. This is, of course, the role that every family in our community has relied on at least once. While all of the positions have specific skill sets, the role of family support advisor requires a very special person to be able to manage the emotional needs that are necessary to be able to perform this job well. Connection with other families is the next natural step. So communications and moderator advisors come into the picture at this point. Helping families know they are not alone by including them in an open and supportive group of others who understand what they may be feeling is vital. The XXYY project joined the world of online chat forums. The parent advisor roles we just reviewed will be the cornerstones of building a strong community for families to rely on. The XXYY project clearly would not exist if not for the dedication, commitment, and years of effort from our amazing families and esteemed healthcare professionals. Thank you for joining our session on the XXYY project and how we did it.